The Russian invasion of Ukraine has brought one question to the forefront of every NATO summit. How can the alliance best support Ukraine? This has been a recurring theme, from the special summit in Belgium shortly after the invasion to the annual meeting in Spain in 2022, and now the 2023 summit in Lithuania. As it becomes increasingly clear that full NATO membership for Ukraine is unlikely in the near term, the discourse has shifted towards the European Union as a potential alternative. Advocates of EU membership point out the Union's collective security provisions, drawing parallels to NATO. However, is the EU truly an adequate substitute for NATO? This question merits examination for several reasons. First, the hurdles to NATO membership are not just about ticking boxes. They involve complex geopolitical dynamics, notably Russia's vehement opposition. Second, while EU membership does offer some security advantages, they are not as robust or clear-cut as NATO's Article 5 commitment to collective defense. That said, EU membership would be preferable to isolation, but Ukraine sees it as a binary choice, NATO or nothing. As we'll discuss, the situation is far more nuanced. If you're interested in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, please leave your comments below, like and subscribe. Rumor has it, every new subscriber makes Putin's mustache twitch a little more. So let's soldier on as we explore why, for Ukraine, NATO remains the ultimate goal, while EU membership, although beneficial, is just the beginning. Barriers to Ukraine's NATO membership. Ukraine's quest for NATO membership faces significant barriers, broadly falling into two categories: constraints from the North Atlantic Treaty itself, and operational policy hurdles within the alliance. Article 10 of the treaty stipulates that all member states must unanimously agree to admit a new country. In the case of Ukraine, Turkey serves as a potential veto player. Acting as a mediator throughout the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Turkey seems unlikely to alter its stance. It's worth noting that hesitance about Ukraine's membership is not limited to Turkey, but exists within NATO headquarters in Brussels as well. Another challenge arises from NATO's standardized rules for new applicants. These require that a potential member must have settled borders to avoid entangling the alliance in existing conflicts. This rule, however, creates an incentive for rival states to foment border disputes to bar entry. Russia exploited this loophole by annexing Crimea in 2014 and launching an invasion on February 24, 2022. Two possible but improbable scenarios could allow Ukraine to meet NATO's no-dispute criteria. First, a decisive Ukrainian victory could compel Russia to formally recognize Ukraine's 2013 borders. This seems unlikely without a significant civil upheaval in Russia. The second involves Ukraine ceding Crimea and possibly more territory in exchange for a peace treaty explicitly allowing NATO membership. Given Ukraine's current resolve to outlast Russia and regain its lost territories, this too appears far-fetched. Although Ukraine remains serious about NATO membership, the current focus of NATO summits is more on coordination rather than expedited membership, leaving Ukraine in a challenging and uncertain position. Is EU membership a viable alternative to NATO for Ukraine? The debate has pivoted towards EU membership as a potential alternative for Ukraine, given the barriers to NATO entry. Though assumed to be easier, EU membership is no cakewalk either. It requires unanimous approval from member states, similar to NATO. Furthermore, the EU's Copenhagen criteria demand rule of law and a functioning market economy. While Turkey may no longer act as a veto in EU talks, Hungary could emerge as a potential barrier. It is crucial to compare security provisions in the EU and NATO to gauge the effectiveness of this alternative. Unlike NATO's Article 5, which allows for collective defense, the EU lacks a similar mechanism. Article 5, although vaguely framed, requires member states to take action as deemed necessary in the event of an attack on a member, giving it a degree of military robustness. This provision has a limited precedent, but was invoked by the US against Afghanistan, under very different circumstances. The EU's response to a continued Russian attack on Ukraine is uncertain. Unlike NATO, the EU does not possess a unified military command, leaving its response mechanisms less defined. While the EU may resort to diplomatic efforts and economic sanctions, the likelihood of direct military intervention remains nebulous. In summary, EU membership, while beneficial, falls short in terms of the robustness of collective defense when compared to NATO's Article 5. The EU's potential reaction to ongoing Russian aggression is less predictable and would likely involve a mix of diplomatic, economic, and limited military actions, dependent on political consensus among its members. Article 42(7) versus NATO's Article 5. Why Ukraine prefers NATO for collective security. While the EU has a collective defense provision, Article 42(7), Ukraine considers NATO's Article 5 to be the superior option for its security goals. Article 42(7) does obligate EU member states to aid a victim of armed aggression on its territory. However, the effectiveness of this clause hinges on the credibility and collective commitment of member states, which is arguably weaker than NATO's counterpart. The issue of believability is central here. Unlike NATO's Article 5, Article 42(7) lacks widespread recognition even among EU citizens. The EU, conceived primarily as a trade bloc, has its defense provisions somewhat obscured within its treaty. In stark contrast, NATO's founding document focuses on collective defense from the get-go, making Article 5 a well-known, widely understood pillar of the alliance. Another differentiator lies in the voting considerations for new members. While NATO deliberations hinge on military capabilities and strategic fit, EU discussions prioritize economic compatibility. As such, NATO's Article 5, underpinned by historical context and a clear-cut focus on collective defense, commands far greater weight and credibility than Article 42(7). While not intended to disparage the EU, these observations highlight key distinctions between NATO's and the EU's approaches to collective defense. For Ukraine, these differences make NATO membership, with its clear commitment to collective defense via Article 5, the preferred path for ensuring its long-term security. The significance of EU membership for Ukraine's security and NATO aspirations. While Ukraine views NATO membership as its ultimate security goal, the benefits of EU membership are substantial and shouldn't be overlooked. The EU offers economic advantages through trade and investment that can foster closer ties and shared interests with Ukraine. This economic interdependence can act as a deterrence mechanism, incentivizing EU states to defend Ukraine against threats or aggression to protect mutual economic benefits. Moreover, the socio-cultural aspects of EU membership also contribute to Ukraine's security. The exchange of culture, travel, and the presence of EU citizens in Ukraine create a sense of affinity that could make EU states more inclined to intervene if Ukraine faces external aggression. The physical presence of EU bodies and citizens in the country further serves as a deterrent to potential aggressors, as any act of aggression would risk harm to EU citizens, possibly triggering a forceful response from their governments. Importantly, EU membership could indirectly pave the way for Ukraine's NATO aspirations. As trade partners and investors, EU states would have a vested interest in protecting their economic interests in Ukraine. This aligns with supporting Ukraine's NATO aspirations, which offer the added advantage of robust security via NATO's Article 5. Essentially, EU membership can serve as a stepping stone, creating additional incentives for member states to back Ukraine's NATO integration, thereby reinforcing its security architecture. While NATO membership remains Ukraine's primary focus for security, EU membership offers invaluable benefits like economic cooperation, cultural exchange, and could potentially even facilitate Ukraine's path towards NATO. The multifaceted support from the EU can serve to enhance Ukraine's security and foster conditions that make its NATO aspirations more achievable. If you found this content valuable, please like, share, and subscribe for more insightful discussions. Your support is immensely appreciated. Stay tuned for upcoming content. Take care.